Lots of us here, I think, will be able to remember when Sundays in England looked very different. Some of you, it'll be even different to it was the Sundays I remember growing up in the 80s and early 90s. In the little town I lived, the only shop open was the newsagent's or the garden centre, and that was it. We then had the in-between years when big shops were open, but as Christians we weren't quite sure. And you might go to Sainsbury's after church and you'd see someone else from church in Sainsbury's and you'd have to make up a little excuse. Oh, we've got people coming for dinner and we've run out of custard. Because we weren't quite sure if it was okay or not. Can you remember those years? We certainly weren't going into the Vicky Centre and doing a big day of shopping on a Sunday, were we, when these laws first came in. Nowadays, I don't know if anyone would even think about it, not shopping on a Sunday, would we? Because we can do it 24/7 whenever we like. I have currently four people I'm caring for, as well as my husband. He looks after himself. We're a household of 6, I'll say it like that right now. So I plan my meals in advance because we've got a lot of eating issues in our house as well on a Sunday. And I sit and do my Sainsbury's online shop on a Sunday to be delivered on Monday. I don't even think about it. Did it stop being wrong? Was it all just culture and tradition? Our younger people probably think the very idea that it could have been seen as a sin to buy something on a Sunday really strange. Maybe that's something to chat about in life groups in the week. I think having one day a week where our communities were mostly not working, if it wasn't an essential job, you didn't work, to actually protect that time for families and friends to be together and to have that day when you didn't have the debate about can I go to church or do I have to work was a good thing. It was a lovely thing, wasn't it? And I think as Christians in churches, in our kind of reluctance and resistance to that changing was because we wanted to protect that good thing, is the truth. But it certainly doesn't say in the Bible that you can't shop on a Sunday, if for no other reason than the Sabbath was Friday night and Saturday for the Jews, wasn't it? But I think one of the ways we help think about these things, these laws and rules and traditions, and to think about what is right, is we take a step back and think about, well, why? Why does it say that? Why do we do that? And that then helps us think about, well, how do we do that? And how do we implement that in practice? And that's a key issue that's coming up in this morning's passage when Jesus is challenged by the Pharisees, who are one of the religious groups of the time, about what is allowed or not on a Sabbath. And we're going to think about how Jesus responded to that, and we're going to think about how it applies to us, and we're going to think about rest. Okay. So we have got to the point, Matthew 12, I haven't written what the verse is, 1 to 13, there you go. About that time, Jesus was walking through some grain fields on the Sabbath. His disciples were hungry, so they began breaking off some heads of grain and eating them. But some Pharisees saw them do it and protested. Look, your disciples are breaking the law by harvesting grain on the Sabbath. Jesus said to them, haven't you read in the scriptures what David did when he and his companions were hungry? He went into the house of God, and he and his companions broke the law by eating the sacred loaves of bread that only the priests are allowed to eat. And haven't you read in the law of Moses that the priests on duty in the temple may work on the Sabbath? I tell you, there is one here who is even greater than the temple. But you would not have condemned my innocent disciples if you knew the meaning of the scripture. I want you to show mercy, not offer sacrifices. For the Son of Man is Lord even over the Sabbath. Then Jesus went over to their synagogue, where he noticed a man with a deformed hand. The Pharisees asked Jesus, does the law permit a person to work by healing on the Sabbath? They were hoping he would say yes, so they could bring charges against him. And he answered, if you had a sheep that fell into a well on the Sabbath, wouldn't you work to pull it out? Of course you would. And how much more valuable is a person than a sheep? Yes, the law permits a person to do good on the Sabbath. Then he said to the man, hold out your hand. So the man held out his hand, and it was restored, just like the other one. Then the Pharisees called a meeting to plot how to kill Jesus. Okay, we'll come to that bit in a minute. I think Jesus here is maybe demonstrating that God gave us common sense. It is good to use it unless he tells us otherwise. And sometimes he will. I've had a number of times in my life when godly wisdom has overruled what seemed like the sensible thing to do. Godly wisdom beats common sense, but common sense is a good place to start if he's not told us something else, isn't it? So the first scenario, when Jesus and his friends are walking in the grain fields, and because the disciples are hungry, they begin to eat some of the grain. I always think that's a bit strange. I walked in the grain fields this morning with my dog. I often do, and I thought if I was hungry, I wouldn't be ripping off the corn and eating it, but I guess ancient grains were different, maybe, I don't know. But the Pharisees see them doing that, and they say that's harvesting, which is work. So they're not allowed to do that on the Sabbath according to their laws, not God's law about harvesting. He's not specific about that. When God gave the 10 Commandments to the Israelites back in the desert, when they were first, figuring out how to live as a nation, he gave the 10 Commandments. The 4th commandment was this: remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but he rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. And in chapter 23 of Exodus, a few chapters on, when he's going into a bit more detail, God tells us why. He says, so that your ox and donkey may rest, and the slaves and foreigners may be refreshed. This law is to protect people and animals from being forced to overwork, which benefits no one in the long run, does it? And this comes up a few more times. The Sabbath's mentioned a lot in those books Rob mentioned, in Leviticus and Numbers and other books in the Bible. A reminder every time it says, keep the Sabbath holy as God is holy, as a reminder that God is holy and he is your Lord. So there's lots of layers and reasons as to why God gave a Sabbath and why it's important and what it symbolizes. I think one of them is that we are trusting him to take the time to rest and refresh ourselves. That's vital, isn't it? And we will, when we do that, you can think of someone like me who's self-employed. I don't have any set holidays. I have to make the choice to take a day off. Will I still have enough? Will we still be okay if we're doing what God has told us to do? God knows that we need to rest. So when we listen to our bodies and our brains and trust him with the rest that we need, we're saying we know God will make sure we still have enough because he knows rest is important. He told us to do it. It's reminding ourselves that our trust is in him. Everything we have is from him, our job, or the family members we look after, or our DIY in our house, or all that other stuff, all our stuff we need to do, it's all from him by his grace. And he created all things, and he took time to enjoy it, and he wants us to do that too. Not to have a life where we're working because of fear or stress. We daren't stop, we're hustling because of pressures from other people, and we don't have time to enjoy this life that he's given us. The Sabbath is a gift to protect us and sustain us and instruct us to take time off to enjoy life. Some of us are really bad at that, aren't we? We literally need a rule to make us stop and enjoy ourselves. Others need to focus more on the Bible verses about the importance of working hard. I've got some of those in my house. But the Israelites who God was giving these rules to, I mention this a lot, but they were slaves. And we know when we read Exodus, they were worked to death, weren't they? All they'd known, their culture of them and their parents and their grandparents and their great-great-grandparents was relentless work. We work or we're whipped, we work or we die, we have to work. It was deeply embedded in their way of life. So God is coming with this law and saying, no, I'm your God. I'm your king, and I say you need to stop because you are free now. You're free to stop and enjoy the life I've given you. Did you know the concept of Sabbath was way bigger than a day? I read this week when I was researching for this, it talks in the Bible about Sabbath years. I thought, oh God, I just like a Sabbath good night's sleep. Sabbath year. Maybe that fits with Rob's and Caroline's words this morning from God. So the big question was for them, though, was, well, what counts as work then? What is work? I was trying to find some verses in the Bible that were more specific. In Exodus 35, it says, don't light fires in your homes on the Sabbath. Later on in Jeremiah, it says, don't carry a load. But over the centuries, what the Pharisees had done is they'd added in more and more and more and more specific details about what work was, trying to cover every eventuality. And that left no room for common sense and no room for specific situations, for personal judgment, or for exceptions. God gave humanity the fourth commandment to rest as a blessing. But they were, and I'm sure they were trying to mean well. We can, villainize the Pharisees in church sometimes, but they were trying to make sure people didn't break it. They were trying to help them out here, but in doing that, they made it a burden rather than a blessing. I've put up there. They were getting lost in the how do we do this rather than remembering the why. So what should have been a blessing became a burden. I hope some of us find that helpful in thinking about our life decisions. And while, harvesting, I think we'd probably all agree it is work. I've been watching Clarkson's farm, and it is hard work harvesting. But picking a few grains because you're hungry isn't work, is it? That's common sense that tells us that's not work. Jesus said to them, this is your law, not God's. My disciples are innocent. And he said, by the way, you Pharisees work in the temple on a Sabbath. They did twice as much work on a Sabbath because there were twice as many offerings coming in. So you make an exception for yourself, but not for other people. The Sabbath was meant, I think, it was for rest and refreshment, and that was an overarching law, an overarching rule. But there are more important laws in God's word, as we see in the second scenario when Jesus heals the man's withered hand. And he says, it's more important to be loving and kind than to follow all the letter of what you've put in and expecting people to do. Jesus said the most important commandment is to love God with all you've got and to love other people. And that comes first. And sometimes you need to overlook other important guidelines for your life, to step out of that, to keep those laws. Because God cares more about people than rules. And his laws are not to restrict and bind and burden us. They are to bless us and bless our communities and bring freedom. I have a confession. This is a real confession. Are you listening now? I have an A-type personality. I'm a very driven, go-getting person. And I think it's trickier for people with A-type personalities, I'm looking at Shelley, to keep the speed limit. So I'm very numbers focused as well. I will put my sat-nav on even when I know where I'm going so I can beat the sat-nav by 1 minute. Yes, I won. This has now got me in a position where I cannot break the speed limit anymore. I don't buy a lot. You don't need to justify it, Beth, because if you're judging me, you've sinned too. But, 34 miles an hour on the edge of Ravenshead I have been. But it is speeding. And I am now at the point where, if I speed again, I'm not going to be speeding at all for a couple of years. So last weekend, I had a 3-hour drive to the Cotswolds and back. And go to the Cotswolds from my house, you've got the A46 and the M69. This great, big, wide-open motorway where nobody is driving in the slow lane at 70 miles an hour. And I said to George, that's going to be really, really hard for me. I'm going to find this really hard, sticking to the rules, sticking to the law. But I know that I've got to because I'm terrified. Do you know what? I didn't. I put my sat-nav on, and normally I'm trying to save 5-10, literally I'm trying to save 5-10 minutes on a 3-hour journey, because then I get there sooner. That's how I walk fast, that's how I do my life. I thought, I can't, I have no option. I'm sticking to this law. I drove the speed limit all the way down to Cotswolds, and I found it was freeing, because I wasn't looking at the time. I was looking at the mileometer a lot. I thought, it really spoke to me that actually, it's the same with God's laws, isn't it? They're not put in place to hold us back, but actually to bring freedom. When we make the decision to follow Jesus and we say, I am following your way now, Jesus, your way goes, whether I like it or not, this is what I'm doing. It actually brings freedom. I had a really nice poodle down and back. I love that after the Pharisees had had this interaction with Jesus, he went to their synagogue. I thought, how did we feel about that? How did they feel about that? And then I saw it because it said afterwards they plotted to kill him. That was the first time they decided they were going to kill him. They were furious, watching him like a hawk, looking for him to mess up, looking to catch him out. And they think that's when he heals this man with the withered hand, or we could more accurately translate it as a paralyzed hand. Is Jesus doing work here? He doesn't actually do anything. He just tells the man to hold his hand out. But for the Pharisees, they'd said you couldn't carry out medical treatment on a Sabbath unless somebody's life was in danger. And this man's life wasn't in danger. So again, that is their rule, not God's. They decided that was what work was. They would rather do nothing than the wrong thing. Have you ever felt there? I know I have. There's times when I've done nothing at risk of doing the wrong thing. Jesus would rather, in this situation, do what is right and risk annoying the lawmakers so much they wanted to kill him. He did not care about the payback or offending people, and he met their burdensome attempts at religion head on. But like I said, all he did was tell the man to hold out his hand. And he again points out these particular Pharisees' double standards when he says, if your sheep fell in a well, you would try and pull that sheep out. That's a lot of work, isn't it? That's hard work. Come on now. He says to them, of course you're permitted to do good on the Sabbath, because this law is about your overall well-being. It's about taking care of yourself. It's about taking care of the people who work for you. It's about a balanced whole life, trusting God that he wants you to rest and enjoy this beautiful world sometimes. He is good, and he cares for you, and he will take care of you. So, are you making time in your life for the things that restore you? I love that verse in Psalm 23. He restores my soul. But it says before that, he makes me lie down in green pastures. And like I said, sometimes we need to be made to do it, don't we? As I said, as a driven person, I'm very self-motivated. I was a girl who did her homework the day it got set in school and annoyed everybody else. But throughout my life, as in loving to achieve and loving to say yes to opportunities, and I've always had loads of jobs at the same time, I kept trying to learn this because I kept getting busy and tired, and I could hear when people said to me, oh, how are you, Beth? I'd say, I'm so busy. And I thought, I hate saying that to people. Sounds like I don't have time for them. And I kept trying to get to grips with this and learn this lesson over and over and over again. And even when I started to make time to rest, I couldn't do it without feeling that nagging guilt. Maybe it means I'm a bit weak. Maybe I'm not the competent, capable woman of God that I believe I am and want to be. I needed to figure out how to do this. I wasn't tired and overstretched all the time. I used to get stress, migraines. And then I got long COVID. I've shared this before, right at the start of the pandemic. I think partly because after I'd had a horrible bout of COVID, I then pushed myself in everything. I was on the leadership team here, then I pushed myself with all the church stuff. I pushed myself with my big kids that had come home and taking care of them. I pushed myself in my job and my work as much as I could, and my body just kind of broke. For 2.5 years, I had long COVID. And I had to learn to totally flip that mindset that I had as a Christian working mother. Work is good, rest equals pathetic. I had to just learn that actually for me, rest was vital, or I couldn't do anything. For quite a long time, if I did 2 things in one day, if I went to the supermarket and walked my dog, I was done for days afterwards. If I had a busy day out, I was done for days afterwards. So the only way I could get through anything was to pace myself and rest. I stopped wearing my, I used to wear what they call like a Fitbit to measure my steps, because it's like that, because I'm numbers focused, it's like that's got to go. Or I'd wear it and try and keep my steps under 500. I learned on a bone deep level that resting is not doing nothing. It's not a wasted day. Rest is sacred. And for some of us, we really need to be super strict with ourselves about this. I don't believe that as Jesus resurrection people living in the last days before he comes back, that we necessarily need to be strict about 1 day a week for ourselves, because we're living in God's rest. But for some of us, we might need to be, if this is something that we really struggle with. Restoration is holy work, and we love it, don't we? We've sung about it this morning. We love the idea of restoring our communities and families and broken lives and broken hearts and all this stuff being restored. But why do some of us find it so hard to allow ourselves to do that, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually? Because it's what God is all about, isn't it? Restoration. So yeah, something to think about. Are you trusting God enough to be able to rest, enough to make time for joyous, restful, beautiful, life-giving, lovely things? Because he's told you have to. Times when we can sit back and just think, wow, God, this world you made is good. What we are creating together, God, is good. The life you've given me is good, and how great you are. And that will be different things for all of us, won't it? For some of us, it will be having a load of people over on a Sunday afternoon, getting the barbecue out and cooking for them. For some of you, that would be the most stressful, unrestful thing you could think of, which is why we don't have specific, tiny, detailed rules anymore, like the Pharisees had, because we're all different, and God knows, and he loves that, and we all restore different ways. So with the altercation about the wheat, as Rob mentioned at the start, Jesus quoted from the Old Testament prophet, Hosea. I, it says, which is God, want you to show mercy, not offer sacrifices. Now, if you look in the wider context of that passage, God isn't saying don't ever sacrifice anything for me or to me, but he's saying he's not interested in superficial sacrifices, Sabbaths, or Sundays. Well, I'm not going shopping and I'm going to church, but I'm sitting in church and I'm maybe judging people when they tell me about their speeding problem. Sticking to the easier religious rules rather than the actually far more sacrificial ones of loving those in need, of helping those in need, like Jesus was doing with this man. How you treat people is the best or the worst way that you can worship God. It's what matters to him above everything else. And the wider context of those Hosea verses, God says, I want you to know me. Don't rely on the laws and the rules and the customs and the traditions. Don't rely on the church services that someone else has come up with and led, as great as they may be. I want you to know me and what matters to me. After the wheat field, Jesus points out clearly who he is. He says, I'm Lord of the Sabbath. When he talks about the Son of Man, he's talking about himself. Rules are never more important than God, are they? Church is not more important than God. And I think sometimes when I've seen Christians struggle with the faith and leave church, sometimes it's been because they started looking for the church to do what only God can do. The church is never going to be perfect, because there's people in it, and people here will get things wrong, and sometimes they will hurt you. And there needs to be a limit to that. You know, we need to be a healthy, functional family, a healthy, safe place. There is a limit to how much mess and trouble that is okay, and how much mistakes. But if our priority is always Jesus, worshipping him, following him, trusting in him to meet our needs and not church, we have so much more grace and love towards our brothers and sisters who are here. Okay, I also wanted to think, just for a few minutes before I finish, about how wrong these Pharisees got it. Jesus came to their synagogue and healed the man's hand, and they decided they would try to kill him because of it. It's hard to understand, isn't it, how they didn't see the miracle and know who he was. I wonder if sometimes in church we can be so focused on what we want, what we think matters, whether we like the worship that morning or the preacher or our small groups, the people that are coming along that we might find challenging, that we can miss God doing something wonderful, the miracle of lives being restored and transformed and healed. You could be irritated on Sunday morning by my little disabled one shouting and screeching at the back. You might have been irritated in the past by my big one coming and sitting on his phone. I'm rejoicing in the miracle. It took him 2 years of coming to this church before he could come through that door. Yeah? Sometimes there are higher laws at work. There are other things going on, and we can rejoice in those miracles. You feeling indignant or defensive or even outraged at what you see as someone doing something wrong does not make you right. What you think are important rules or conventions, even Christian beliefs, like the Sabbath. Maybe there is a higher law playing out of a life redeemed or a soul on its way to being saved, the amazing grace of God, or someone is choosing love over laws. So next time you get irritated or frustrated, maybe try stopping and asking God what he's up to, what he's doing. He might say it's none of your business. Get the thing out your own eye. When healing this man, Jesus doesn't remind them of his authority that time. He doesn't say, hello, I'm God, I can do what I like. I've healed him. That's the proof. That shows his authority, the fact that he healed this man just by him stretching out his hand. But he points out their inconsistency. You would go to the effort of rescuing your sheep on a Sabbath, but you wouldn't heal this man. We all prioritize certain rules, certain ways, certain traditions, certain cultures above others. It's naturally how we do it and who we are, because of our background, because of our personality, whatever that might be. And we all see some things as more important than other people might. There she goes. And we can be great at making allowances for ourselves sometimes, can't we? Well, there's an exception in this case because it was my sheep and I really need my sheep. But we can forget to apply that when we see someone else potentially doing something wrong, when we don't usually know the full story or their situation. Some of us, I think, I was going to call my talk Chill Out, and I thought that might even annoy people right from the start. But some of us, I think, just need to chill out. When it comes to other people, when it comes to ourselves, literally when it comes to our diaries and our days, finding some time to just trust that God has got you. You are not indispensable. You are created and called to chill out, to rest in God, to get some God-given perspective and remember what matters, to love God and love each other. I'm going to finish with the other verses that follow on in this passage that Rob started with. I thought this might help us. Just to say as well, I felt God said it to me even this week, Beth, what are you going to let go of? You either let go of yourself, of your own health, mental health, physical health, spiritual health, whatever, or you've got to let go of the fact that your garden is a mess. If anyone wants to bless me. I've taken a long time praying about we really need a cleaner because, George is a full-time foster carer, but we could spend our evenings cleaning, but we need to rest. I am so blessed by OSAS and Happy Man, their new cleaning business. I hope it's blessed them as well. Oh my goodness, there are things in my house that have not been cleaned in the 20 years I've lived there. Thank you. But it's okay, isn't it? Because I'm called to do other things, yeah? And we can't do everything, and that's why we've got each other and why we're here. But anyway, maybe that's the word for someone. What are you going to let go of? But Jesus goes on after he's gone to the synagogue and the man's hand has been healed. He says, Jesus knew what they were planning to kill him. So he left that area, and many people followed him. He healed all the sick among them, but he warned them not to reveal who he was. This fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah concerning him. Look at my servant whom I have chosen. He is my beloved, who pleases me. I will put my spirit upon him, and he will proclaim justice to the nations. He will not fight or shout or raise his voice in public. He will not crush the weakest reed or put out a flickering candle. Finally, he will cause justice to be victorious, and his name will be the hope of all the world. God, for anyone here who is feeling crushed, who is feeling like a flickering candle, like they don't know how they're going to keep going. They're just tired and weary and overworked and overstressed. And when they look back, it feels like it's always been like that. And that hope of, well, when it gets easier, I'll do this. When it gets easier, once this has happened. God, I pray that you would speak to them, lift that burden, and show them how they need to make that happen. And trust you to take the steps to make that happen. I thank you for your gift, for your blessing of rest. You know us. You know that we need it. I'm sorry for the times when I found it hard to trust you with that. Thank you that it doesn't make us any lesser, any weaker, any less your precious children to take time out to enjoy this beautiful world with you. And may we all do that for your glory and for our good. Amen.